It's a great pleasure today to introduce Dave Patterson. Dave is one of the greats of computer science. He comes from one of the great computer science programs in the nation, and a huge amount of the great stuff that's happened at Berkeley in the past 30 or 35 years, Dave Patterson has had his fingers in. So it's a real pleasure to have him here. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering, a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He's the Berkeley Risk guy, he's the RAID guy, he's the AMP Lab guy, he's the PAR Lab guy, he's the everything guy, and it's been a great pleasure to work with him over many years and have many of his students here over time, and many Berkeley students. So Dave has his, as I say, fingers in many pies, and most recently it's been MOOCs. So he and Armando Fox have taught a software engineering MOOC for the past few years. So of the many topics Dave could have talked about today, he's chosen to talk about his MOOC experience. So please help me welcome Dave Patterson.
Thanks. I really like, I come here every few years to give a talk. I really like doing it. I feel like I'm an honorary faculty member here. I think partly Ed and I do all kinds of policy issues. I think Berkeley and Washington have a common worldview and share a lot of cultural values. And we love competing with you and trying to recruit graduate students and faculty. So I'm going to tell you about, we were one of the early guys to do MOOCs, it turned out. I'll tell you the story about it. I'm reflecting back on our, as one of the early people, we've gotten more experience than most in talking about what we've learned and what we think the next century, what's the textbook going to be of this next century. And the way I'll do it, I'm going to stop in time for questions, and then I'm going to do this thing that Catherine McKinley did since I've been doing this for a while and done okay, that people think my road was just smooth, a silver spoon in my mouth all the way, and I will disabuse you of that thought, what actually happened to me and what works for me at the end, after the question and answer period. Okay, so there's going to be a bunch of myths that I'm going to talk about. And the first thing I'm talking about is the teaching of software engineering, and then I'll talk about the MOOC stuff. So I think there's 8 myths here. So the first is there's no software engineering jobs in the United States. So that seems like a funny thing to bring up. Well, it was because Ed and I worked on this issue 8 years ago. I actually wrote an op-ed on it, and so many people in our field was saying the future was dismal because of all the jobs were being outsourced. I had to write editorials as president of ACM to try and get people to stop doing it, despite the fact that there was, the Department of Labor Statistics said things weren't that bad. But I was hearing it in the hallways when I would visit companies. So whatever happened to that, right? So I just, a couple days ago, got the Department of Labor Statistics, and what they do is, they do 10 years apart, and their most latest data is how many jobs were there in 2010, what do they project in 2020, but that's this month's data. So as you can see, electrical engineers, there's about 300,000, and they project a 6% increase, and they call that slower than average. Attorneys and lawyers are 10 and 60%, what they say is about average. Physicians are making a comeback and go up about 24% faster than average. What about software engineers? 30% is projection. So compared to electrical engineers, there are going to be 15 software engineers for every electrical engineer, or you could say software engineering will grow in this decade by as many electrical engineers as there are. So that's what's happening in jobs. I found another one where this jobs service, careercast.com, decided they would rank all the jobs in the United States, the top 200 jobs, and they calculate the salary and the job outlook, like the data from the Department of Labor, and the physical demands and the work environment, stress, things like that. And they have a formula and they rank all the jobs. So here are the jobs, and thank God you're not a lumberjack, or a newspaper reporter. But the jobs when you're a kid, firefighter, policeman, yeah. But attorneys not doing that well. And then all the engineers are over here, except for one engineer, and that's the one that we do. So are there jobs in U.S. in software engineering? Absolutely, and it's actually the best job in the United States. Okay, so that's that myth. The other myth about software engineering is it's just programming. And programmers just, somehow we attract these optimists. They say, this time the code's going to work the first time, or almost. Just a little bit of debugging and it'll be ready to go. I don't need specs or testing frameworks or anything. And so they think software engineering is like vitamins. So it's kind of software engineering is unnecessary and unnatural. And maybe it's good for you, but nobody really does it. And that's what students think when they come into a software engineering class. The other myth is there's plenty of time to teach this. They're going to be here 4 or 5 years, lots of time. In reality, if you're getting a degree in computer science or computer engineering, you're taking a 1-semester course or maybe 2 quarter courses. And undergraduates take 4 courses at a time, so if you divide that out, you get about 4 or 5 weeks to teach something as vast as important as software engineering. The fourth myth is that the instructor is an expert in this stuff. So it's really that for software engineering, they're novices. It's very unlikely that the people teaching the class are practicing software engineers, and it's even unlikely that they're researchers in software engineering. I looked in the last 20 years, 16 different faculty have taught the Berkeley's course, and not all of them, few of them were in software engineering. Well then, what about the software methodologies? It must be easy to pick them. It's actually, it's hard. There's a lot to choose from. What we call the plan and document methodologies, the more traditional ones, are trying to be like civil engineering, making software as predictable as building a bridge in quality and cost and schedule. So there's waterfall, spiral, there's rational unified process, and many more. The newfangled ones, these Agile methodologies, which is more like movie making, there's extreme programming, Scrum. So there's actually a lot to choose from, and the faculty aren't experts. Well, then it must be that the software engineering textbooks are really good. Well, not so much. Well, I've read several of them. They're really surveys of platforms and issues versus following Confucius. I hear and I forget, I see and remember, and I do and understand. There's not that much do and understanding from them. So the leading textbook came out in the first edition in 1982. John's and Hennessy's in my book was in 1990. This is in its 7th edition, so people have been using this forever. This is the leading textbook. What's the Amazon rating out of 5 stars? 1.7. This is the leading textbook. And I'm going to put up on the screen, just for a short period of time, what Amazon has selected as representative comments by purchasers of the book. What do they think is representative of the books? So you slave away as an author, you put your book out there, going to tell your mom about the book, or your kids, like this case, and So the really positive one is it's very hard to read due to the poor organization and writing and its fluff. That's the positive one. The other ones are worth it. This is the leading textbook in software engineering. Now that you can figure that one out. I want to protect the author. How about software engineering tools? Really, there's not that many tools for most of these methodologies, or they are tools, but they're incredibly expensive computer-aided software engineering tools that you can't get for the classroom. So it's not likely students are going to follow your advice because there's no tools together. And without tools, you can't really check to see if they have. And finally, these courses leave you well prepared for careers. What really happens is industry complains bitterly about the software engineering courses. I don't know about here, but virtually every other university, they complain about it. And I think it's the only course that everybody complains about. Nobody complains about the data structures course, they complain about the software engineering course. So what's the state? The sad, stable state is you teach the course, students ignore the lectures and build software the way they were going to do it anyways. So it's just a project course. This is frustrating to the instructors, boring to students, disappointing to industry. And the reward for this, for volunteering to teach this important stuff, is terrible teaching evaluation, which is why it's kind of a hot potato. 16 different faculty at Berkeley. No, you take it. No, you take it. And I looked in for the data structures course or the operating system course, about a half a dozen people teach it. They enjoy teaching it. So Armando and I decided to try and revamp this course, and we're certainly not experts in this. So we thought we'd start by asking companies that build software that millions of us use every day. They must know what the issues are, and they've been complaining. So companies here in the Bay Area, like Amazon and Microsoft and Google, and asked them what they thought about our training. And they said, first of all, the students really can code, but they lack basic software engineering skills. The number one thing was dealing with legacy code, undocumented legacy code. The first 3 companies said this, and we tried to argue with them because how in the hell are we going to teach it? But by the 4th and 5th said it, okay, we got to work on that one, right? So they all said that was the number one issue. Then, kind of collectively, the second point was working in teams for non-technical customers, and then automated testing and take testing seriously. That was the advice we got. So in revamping the course, doing projects in teams, that was a pretty natural thing to do, 5-student teams. We decided for a non-technical customer to go to nonprofit organizations. And that proved to be a great idea because they can't afford IT staff or even buy software. So anything students would do, they were grateful for. So, and then what we're talking about as an application is something in the cloud where it's not just some web portal, right? This is a real application doing really interesting things. So I thought I would show you what it's like.
For the Oakland Children's Hospital was tedious as it was all done by paper, and our website puts this entire process online. First, let's log in as an admin, and we can add some nurses to the surgery unit.
This is to do vacation scheduling.
Currently, you can see that there are no nurses in the system, and we can add new nurses by uploading an Excel spreadsheet. Now we can individually manage these nurses and view their vacations. We note that there is also a rules section where an administrator can set specific rules for a unit and shift regarding specific holiday schedules or union rules. But for now, we will start the vacation scheduling process by clicking Finalize Nurses. This will create accounts for all the nurses and notify the first nurse that it is his or her turn to start scheduling vacations.
Now as a nurse, after I receive the email, I can set up my account and start scheduling vacations. Now I'll schedule a valid vacation first and set the start date and end date. Once I've saved it, I can now see that it appears on the calendar. If I try to schedule an invalid vacation, for example, one that is less than 7 days long, I'll get an error message. When I'm done scheduling my vacation, I can click Finalize, and this will send an email to the next nurse to start scheduling a vacation and to all the administrators following this unit. The Oakland Children's Hospital is planning to use our app in their next vacation scheduling period. Thanks for watching.
So she was excited at the end there. So the other ones were, the Humane Society, working with the dormitories, or a local VC firm. So it really helped kind of give students a real customer, and it made them excited about what they were doing. Now the bonus is, as computer scientists, the university is supposed to be helping the local community. That's part of a charter of the university. So here's a chance for us to actually do it. And the students were so excited, and the last time we offered, they started a student organization to do this same thing called Blueprint. And so the alumni of the class are trying to help other nonprofits in the area. So that was a nice benefit. So for the next thing we want to do is to pick a platform and a methodology. And we just wanted something that would motivate students. And either smartphones or the cloud would motivate students. And then the software methodologies, there's this, what I said, the plan and document, the more traditional ones, this new Agile one, which ones you pick. And we decided we should pick the ones with the best tools. We'll let the best tools decide because A, we got to cram everything into 4 or 5 full-time weeks. If they have a tool, they're more likely to follow the advice, and we can grade the process. So let's let the tools decide. In our view, it's no contest. By a large margin, the tools for Agile software development and cloud computing apps are the best for software as a service. In particular, we're using the Ruby programming language and the Rails framework, which is a really amazing set of tools. It has the fringe benefit of demonstrating to students to do software engineering. You have to be willing to learn new things over time. It's a lifelong learning process. So what is this Agile stuff that we're embracing? Agile came about as kind of an allergic reaction to the plan and document methodologies. A group of people went away to a retreat, and when they came out, they kind of posted this on the door of the Church of Plan and Document Methodologies. This is exactly what they wrote word for word, and that's why they call it the manifesto. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, so that's kind of a dig in the plan and document styles. Customer collaboration over contracts rather than you get a spec and all you have to do is meet it. Now let's work with the customer. Responding to change over following a plan. That is being flexible rather than sticking to plan like the traditional models. That is, while there's value of the items on the right, we value items on the left more. So this is a break from the past. So it embraces change as a fact of life. They're continuously improving a prototype versus these big phases of the traditional plan and document models. They meet with the customer regularly. So every week, every so-called iteration, every week or two, what do you think of it now? What do you think of it now? To make sure they're on the right track. Test-driven development, which I'll talk about a little bit, is so testing is taken seriously. User stories are these ways, I'll talk about that, to work with the customer and figure out what it is. And then velocity is simply the number of average user stories per week to measure progress. The version that we're using is called extreme programming. This is pioneered by a guy named Kent Beck. And this is basically the quote where he said what extreme is. If short iterations are good, then make them as short as possible. So an iteration should be days or weeks, not months or years. If simplicity is good, always do the simplest thing that could possibly work. That is, you don't write extra code than you need to get the functionality that the test asks. And if testing is good, test all the time. In fact, write the test before you write the code. And that's part of XP. And if code reviews are good, then do them all the time. Program in pairs with people looking over your shoulder. So how does this work in the classroom? This works great in the classroom. You can do many iterations with even in a single course, so students can get up to speed, see what they did wrong, and learn the next time. So that's a big help. Write the simplest thing, so they write the least amount of code. They don't anticipate code they don't need. They take testing. If you write the test before you write the code, you're taking testing seriously. And then you get this peer learning by the pair programming. It works really great in the classroom. The students can teach each other what they don't know. So it's a really great match for the classroom. So Agile Extreme Iteration Model is talking to one of these non-technical customers for the nonprofit. We do a mock-up borrowing ideas from the human-computer interface community of doing it informally in paper and pencil. We do the user stories with that customer as well, and then we capture the design with a tool called Cucumber, which I'll show you. We write the test before we write the code using RSpec. We then measure the rate that we're completing these user stories. We deploy it into the cloud, and they're doing this all part of the class, and that's one iteration, and we do this 4 times in the semester. So what about that legacy code thing? Well, we make a separate effort besides doing it for the project, and it turns out all the skills that you do for doing XP development apply to legacy code, that writing the test before you make modifications of it, all that stuff works well for legacy code, and we have an assignment there. And then a really important idea in software engineering is design patterns, and we explicitly talk about design patterns and how to do that, how to refactor your program. So as I'll say several times, these methodologies are embraced by tools. Our design patterns is inherent in Ruby and Rails, test-first development with RSpec, behavior-driven design with Cucumber. There's a tool that helps you track the progress called Pivotal Tracker. And of course, the importance of source code control systems like Git and GitHub. And then deploying to the cloud this time. So let's talk about this one, which I think is the most impressive tool of the bunch of Cucumber. So you start off with these 3x5 cards, and you meet with these non-technical customers, and you're just writing on these 3x5 cards to figure out the use cases. This is actually an application we use for the graduate student visit today to schedule classes. So as an EECS staff member, so that I can accommodate last-minute accommodations, I want to be able to manually tweak the schedule. So then we do a paper and pencil mock-up of these interface, and to show the animation of the user interface, we do what are called storyboards. So if Armando was scheduling, he pushes a button, that other window pops up, and he saves changes, it goes back. This gets turned into text that is input to Cucumber. So what was on that 3x5 card is what's called a feature in Cucumber. And then there's many scenarios for that feature or user story. So what you first state is the preconditions, then the actions that take place with the browser, and then the postconditions. So Cucumber will check this. So when VelvoCon is available at 10:20, this is a specific use of it. These are the actions. I select Con, and for the 10:20 meeting with Armando Fox, and I press Save Changes. And this is what should happen as a result of this. Then I should see Con added at the 10:20 meeting. So how do we do this? We get this natural language stories from the 3x5 cards, a little bit stilted, but still natural language. We follow these given, when, and then steps. And then this gets mapped onto Ruby code that is the test. So how do we do that? Regular expressions, that's the big idea. If you just write regular expressions to find out which user stories match, and then that gets mapped to Ruby code, but we are able to get correctness and coverage going from 3x5 cards into Ruby code almost magically. So again, this is just one of many examples where we have methodologies and tools so the students really do it. We can measure their progress. We can give them feedback on how they're doing their estimates. And by the way, all these tools are free because it's an open source community and there's sources in the cloud. Okay, so that's what we did. What's the evaluation of it? I'll show you lots of evaluations. First is students voting with their feet. We taught it 4 times in the last 4 years. The average, 20-year average of the class is 55 students. We were able to use the MOOC technology to expand it, so 161, so that's voting with their feet, so it's growing up with Moore's Law. In fact, we're teaching it right now, and it's grown up again by another Moore's Law, but we haven't evaluated that. Students also voted with their hands. At Berkeley, we're on a 7-point teaching scale. So it's using the MOOC technology in the class, but these are regular Berkeley students. I'll talk about the MOOC stuff later. But we're able to expand the class. What are the Berkeley students' evaluations of, and we get rated on a 7-point scale? Well, those were, the ratings went up with using the MOOC material in the class and recording the MOOCs. And that's actually the record for both class size and ratings, for either the instructor or for the course. And usually these things are anti-correlated. Usually the bigger the course, the harder it is to get good scores, but they went together. Okay, so that was asking the Berkeley students what they thought of it. We asked the students after they graduated and were doing other courses, and so I broke them into 2 pieces, the ones who took the course still in school and the ones that are in industry. And you can see there's some things they agreed upon, like version control importance, but things that they had difference was like the ones in industry thought, 85% thought the legacy code refactoring was really important, and fewer still in school. 70% thought Ruby on Rails was really important to them versus many fewer in school. The JavaScript, 60% of them thought it was important, less so in school. And then it was flipped around for the students still in school. They thought pair programming was more important. Where often in industry, only some companies do pair programming. So, after they graduated, we asked what they thought and still got positive. And I say it's important to see the people in school versus the people, or get people in an industry. The next evaluation was to ask, what does industry think of this? This is just anecdotal, but a guy from Google, an engineering manager, said he really liked this compared to other programs he's seen. And Thomas Siebel of Siebel, who founded Siebel Systems, the customer relationship management company, he has a new company, and he says the people in his company really got a lot of this course. And we asked the students, the non-technical customers collectively, and half of them tried to hire the student, and 90% said they were happy or thrilled. And here's an interview with the nurses on the nurse vacation scheduler.
They contacted us and arranged to meet with us every week. Sometimes we met weekly, sometimes it was every 2 weeks, but never for more than 20 minutes probably. Yes. Didn't take a lot of time for us, but trying to convey to them the rules that we have to go by for vacation. We showed them what we did, and then we showed them the rules, and gave them a copy of the rules. It was so smooth.
Yes. They came back with ideas that we couldn't have put forward and brought into this institution.
You got a lot of opportunities to give feedback on what they were doing, and that they tried to incorporate your suggestions.
And they easily fixed any
They
concerns.
did. It was amazing.
So now with this prototype in place, is there a plan to use this and hope things get better?
Correct, yes.
So our vacations are due February 1st of each year. And so we start usually in January, and that's when we're going to start using it.
Laura and I, we're both on the 5th floor. We'll end up trialing this this year, and if it's successful for us, it'll probably spread through other units in the hospital.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much for your time and also for working with our students.
Thank you.
It was great.
It was a pleasure.
Okay, and then the other thing that happened is ACM and IEEE, every 7 years or so, they do a curriculum standard, and subsequent to our efforts, they published this standard, and it said they kind of affirmed what we were doing. They said in that standard, if you're going to teach software engineering, it's really important to do it in project teams, even though projects are hard to do in a class, because that's a great way for students to learn that material and the communication skills. And they also said that there's big evidence that iterative models are an excellent way for students to learn these things. They should try it several times in the class, and if you're going to do it several times, it needs to be short, so the Agile model allows to do it. So Armando and I thought, boy, this is really great what Armando has come up with, and we made a pact to write a book, because that was how we were going to do educational technology transfer. And we were both excited about ebooks, ebook version of textbooks, which were, when we said this a couple years ago. In particular, because software changes faster than paper books. So you write this paper book around software, and it's out of date almost as soon as it's available. So ebooks get this incredibly fast publication. It takes me 9 months for my architecture book. It's going to come out tomorrow, and I was done in January. And with ebooks, 2 days later after you're finished writing, it's out there in people's hands. Software can change a lot in 9 months, right? And it's great 2 days. There's no errata. You can push the button, and all the books in the field get the bugs fixed in it. What a wonderful thing for authors. And editions, publishing, print run, the last 1,000 is a lot cheaper than the first 1,000, so they print them, stick them in a warehouse, and it usually takes 2 or 3 years to empty the warehouse. We don't have that with ebooks. We can do a new edition whenever we want. My guess is we'll need to do one every year to keep up with the change of software, but it's up to us. So where I'm going to talk, I'm going to talk about MOOCs and other things next. So 6 months after we made the blood oath to write the book, we were approached to do a MOOC, and it was actually Berkeley's first MOOC, and I think it was Coursera's either first or second one. And we've offered it several times, and 10,000 have earned certificates last year. So the ebook and the MOOC were developed hand in hand, and each of these 8 or 10 minute segments maps onto a section of the book. And we've done the MOOC 3 times, we're recording it the 3rd time this time, and every time we recorded it, we did a new edition of the book, and we're doing the second beta. So why did MOOCs happen recently? Why didn't it happen earlier? Well, it happens in part because we're reusing professors' investment. We're doing the live lecture model, so it's kind of like recording a play versus making a movie. It's a lot less work for us, so that's why we did it. But we've been doing that for decades, right? YouTube, free wide-scale video distribution, that's a big deal. I think and maybe Ed and I both tried to distribute videos, tapes, and that was a bad idea. This is only 2006. The Khan Academy, Sal Khan, discovered that people much preferred short lectures, 10-minute ones, instead of 60 or 90-minute ones. He discovered that because YouTube wouldn't let you distribute anything longer than 10 minutes. But it turned out to be really great. That was much better model. That's 2006. But a big question is, why didn't television revolutionize education? All that stuff is, how do you answer questions? And the Stack Overflow technology is just 2008 when that came out. So that's a scaled up way to answer questions, where you can read other people's questions and answers and ask your own. And the faculty can just check on that, but it can scale up to thousands or even tens of thousands. And then finally, it's not just the lectures, it's the interesting assignments and auto-grading those assignments. You needed cloud technology to be able to do that. And in our case, because we're doing programming assignments, really great Rails testing tools, and that's just in the last few years. So that's kind of like, it hit the newspapers in 2011. Really, the technology, maybe it could have done a year or so before, but it's now that we can do that. The auto-grading strategies that we do, we're basically taking advantage of a lot of great Rails tools for programmers and deploying them in the cloud to help the grading. So we use RSpec for correctness of code, but what about code quality and things? There are tools that Rails people provide to give you feedback on your program, notifying what's called design smells. There's code that'll check for that and make suggestions, and code complexity things. How about testing your tests? Well, there's tools that will have programs with bugs in them to exercise to see if your tests work. How about the legacy app and test coverage, continuous test coverage? Well, there's a tool that lets you do that called Mechanize. And then for the exams themselves, obviously multiple choice ones are relatively straightforward. And there's, edX is trying to do these essay ones. That's being worked on right now. But we haven't tried that. A challenge for a software course is distributing software, and what we did, Armando's idea was virtual machines were invented for this, and we have a huge amount of software. It's 2 gigabytes of software with dozens of tools. Just get all the versions in the virtual machine, distribute it. It's supposed to work, and it did. Our technology actually did work. There was a few issues, but the forums, the forum resolved those issues, so pretty much you plugged in the virtual machine worked. Only thing we needed, is because of the number of students, was some help from our industrial college, because 2 gigabytes times tens of thousands of students was a lot of bandwidth, and they volunteered. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 5 Mooc myths. The first Mooc myth is that MOOCs are a threat to current US undergraduate programs. All this data I've seen, and I saw earlier, I think, from Dan, is most of the students are outside the US. So for us, it was 20%, and that's been constant over time. And there's a long tail. 113 countries, people earn certificates. How about their education? Is it 80% of the people have a bachelor's or higher? So these are not undergraduates. They've already, they've got advanced degrees even. And 70% have full-time jobs. So what this is really, MOOCs today are a threat to continuing education programs. If I was in the continuing education program charging money, boy, here's this other model that's probably very, very serious challenge. It is not yet something that's affecting undergraduate programs, and I think many people have similar data to this. It's going to, MOOCs are going to dilute our courses. We're going to have wimpy courses to make them MOOCable. A common faculty complaint, hey, you can't teach everything in a MOOC that I teach in the classroom. That's right. But a better question is, what can we deliver that helps our on-campus students and that thousands of people around the world could also benefit from? So what benefits the Berkeley students are these auto-graders, because they get quick, fair, uniform feedback on their programming assignments rather than the varieties of what human readers would do. And that lets us shift effort from grading, which everybody hates, to working with students for projects. And then the MOOC minus the unMOOCable still has value. So we don't do projects or pair programming for the kind of continuing education students. But many of those people say, this is by far the best course I've ever taken, much better than anything ready for me, available to me in 113 countries around the world. Another concern is it's going to weaken the on-campus pedagogy. We're going to, lowest common denominator is going to be the worst kind of teaching methods. I think it's not that way. Well, for our course, we set the record in teaching evaluations with MOOC despite a really big class. And what's really interesting is there's not enough numbers in your class, but there's enough numbers in the MOOC that we can start using what's called inferential statistics to apply when you have thousands of students. So there's something called from the education school. This is common and that gets used on GRE and SAT exams. So exploratory factor analysis lets you figure about testing comparable concepts, and helps you vary exams. Item response theory helps you see which questions are more difficult for the good students, so that helps you figure out which are good questions, a problem for all of us making testings. And then what Amazon and other companies do, A/B testing. With thousands of students, you can try something on a narrow segment and see if they do differently to help you give you feedback on your education, beyond like a number between 1 and 7 as your feedback from your course. So I really believe that MOOCs can help improve the on-campus pedagogy. It's not a threat. The fourth Mooc myth is that faculty are getting infatuated with these MOOCs and not pay attention to their students and hurt productivity. Well, 4 times as many. At Berkeley, that's a big improvement. And San Jose State tried a really interesting experiment for a circuits course from MIT using a MOOC by Anat Agarwal. They used the MOOC homeworks and lectures, and then they did the same exams as a prior course. And the students in this format did 5% higher in the first exam, 10% higher in the second exam. But the big deal was that 91% got a C or better versus 59% before. So a lot more students are finishing the course. So that's a really great way to improve productivity, that students don't have to repeat the course over and over again. So MOOCs can help. I think for a lot of faculty, MOOCs are depressing thought, as they are now going to become teaching assistants for homogeneized courses, right? But what a boring life that is. So Armando came up with this coined this term SPOC for Small Private Online Course. Basically what it does, here's a menu of all the MOOC technologies. Which ones would you like to use in your course? So custom to you. So how would you like your programming assignments automatically graded? How's that sound? Okay. How about you would like to use the MOOC forum to get questions answered? Would you like to use the videos to help you prepare lectures or portions of lectures? There's parts you're not too sure about. Maybe you'd like to use them or mix those in. Or you're traveling and who's going to cover your course? Or if you really like tutoring more than you like lecturing, then flip the classroom and the students watch the videos. So we actually did an experiment around this. So I think the SPOC version of this is rather than everybody just being a TA for the same nationwide courses, it can help faculty and actually help you and make your morale better. So we actually did an experiment this last spring with 5 other universities. They participated in our beta program for the book. And they picked from what I call the SPOC spectrum. So all of us used the textbook, kind of by definition. All of the instructors watched the videos, including me. I watched my old videos. All of them reused the assignments, and all but one used the auto-graders because she had some problems with that at her school. Everybody but us reused the exams because we couldn't, at Berkeley we had to make up new exams. And then the mixture of using the forums. And then, as you can see, kind of half of them basically flipped the classroom. One was actually a completely online course, and the rest of us just reused the lecture slides, and the videos were optional. So what was the good and bad of this? All right, what was the bad? Given that it was a MOOC, the answers were available on the internet. That was not so good. At the time, the auto-graders checked for output, but they didn't really do this code-style stuff, but we're trying it right now. As I speak, we're trying that. Some students' computers were too slow to run the virtual machine. Some didn't know Linux, so that it added to their learning burden. And there were some logistic hassles, of course, and some of the students used that as an excuse to bail. The good news is the auto-graders took the burden off the staff, and everybody loved that. And it emphasized to the students the importance of test-driven development. You got to write the tests first before you write the code, and that made that point. The video lectures were dense, but highly efficient in that the students could pause, rewind if they wanted to see it again. That was a benefit. They were excited about using the latest technology, Rails and Agile. That was not something from decades ago. They were getting the same course that the Berkeley students again. This was not a watered-down course. This is a difficult Berkeley course, and they liked that. And a bunch of them got jobs based on the material that the SAS and Agile led directly to jobs and to internships. Next time is perhaps participate, besides the local SPOC forum, have the global MOOC forum. Talk to other students in other schools about the same point about some of these issues. Often students don't understand the importance of testing, and if they had interacted with people with more experience, they could get that. And then one of the nice things about the MOOCs, many of the students, in reward for getting a free course around the world, volunteered to help. We called them world TAs. We had TAs in all 24 time zones that would help answer questions. And maybe you would like to take advantage of them to get your questions answered about some of these tools. Okay, so I'm heading towards my last couple of slides of conclusions. And the good news is all of them want to do it again. So, first part is about teaching software engineering. It's this unnatural act. You don't have that much time. The teachers don't have experience. There's a lot of methodology to choose from. The books aren't very good. There's no tools, and then industry complains about if you do that. So what's happened, and the reason excited about this and talking about it, is compared to when I was in school and taking these courses, and IBM had armies of programmers and it had nothing to do with the classroom. The software engineering, the software industry is being revolutionized with software as a service and Agile. This is happening independent, but the good news is this revolution is making it easier for us to teach software engineering. So the SAS tools, multiple iterations to get better code, and the students actually learn what you say, use it, and actually appreciate the value of it and use it later in life. And so now the faculty, students, and industry like this vision of it, which is a big change in the past. So what do the MOOCs do? The MOOCs really explain your classroom. It decreases the size and the scope of the course, and repetitions are more or less for free. Each time we recorded it, it was probably taught 3 or 4 times. We needed one 20-hour-a-week TA to maintain it. Didn't cost us to do that. I think you need the ebook. I don't think the MOOC by itself, it was just too challenging both for students and particularly for faculty. They want to be able to answer questions, so you needed a 400-page book. You can pack more information in a 400-page book than you can into lectures. And so whereas the MOOCs expand the size of your classroom, the MOOCs and ebooks expand the number of classrooms and then can empower and improve the morale of faculty. And so that's why I think the 21st century textbook is going to be not MOOCs, but this hybrid of MOOCs, of SPOCs and ebooks. So here's, if you want to learn more, there's a bunch of things. And let me thank Armando and all the people who worked with it. And I'm ready for questions. Ed.
So I'm interested in the approach of using your full lectures, and obviously like slicing them up into 10-minute pieces, I guess, versus studio recording. And how much time did you spend devising skill testing questions for each of your 10-minute segments? I presume that's part of your methodology.
Yeah, so the question is about the live lecture and stuff like that. So it was really interesting. I had long done what's called peer instruction. And so you're lecturing to big, and this was developed by a physics professor at Harvard. And the idea was students lose track of the forest for the trees, so he would periodically ask a simple high-level question, and then people would vote individually, and then you would talk to your neighbor and vote again. So this is called peer instruction. So I'd always done that. So it struck me that the live lecture model, we could just use peer instructions at the end of every segment, so the students did it. We've actually added a twist to that this semester, where we ask a compelling question at the beginning of the segment. So here's the segment. We'd ask some question like, well, how in the world could you turn those 3x5 cards into a user test? How would you do that? So we ask a compelling question, give the 10-minute segment, and then we'd follow with the peer instruction in the class. So what the video editor would do would be to make the 10-minute segment, and the way the MOOC technology works is you have to answer that question, and they can extract the question from the video and answer the question. And then you can hear the discussion that we have with the students about that. And often what will happen is, we'll explain the answers, and then there'll be some questions from the audience. And so that's a 10-minute segment. So it's really hard to make those peer questions. It's only one slide, it's just 4 questions, but making good multiple choice questions that's, not obvious and stuff is really hard. So it was really hard work. The reward for the Berkeley students is we had great attendance. Every 10 minutes they were going to get a question about what we just talked about. So now we were doing 80-minute lectures, so there'd be kind of 7 segments with questions in there, and so they wouldn't get that bored. So it really was a great match. Now, the other thing about kind of the studio approach with the live lecture is, boy, those people who've been doing those studios are just pouring incredible hours in, like making movies. Oops, I made a mistake. Shoot it again, So I don't know if they put so much energy into it, I don't know if they're ever going to re-record them again. Ours is like, we've done it. This is the 3rd time we've done it. We made some mistakes, but we get to, the plus side is we get the feedback from the students of what they didn't like. So we get feedback that we incorporate the next time. If people were willing to redo the studios every time, that would be better, but I'm glad we're doing it this way. So that's kind of the trade-off. And I think in terms of making it affordable, recording the live lecture shouldn't hopefully not that expensive. And so if we ever have to pay for MOOCs, if we have to figure out how this money comes from, maybe this will be less expensive. But that's what we're doing. Most people are probably doing the studio model. So that was my short answer. Okay, yes?
So one concern that I've read about, and it seems like a reasonable concern to me, is, and the fact that you mentioned too that San Jose State used a course from MIT to teach its students. It seems like if that were to happen, big players would monopolize education. And if I'm paying some X number of dollars to go to a small school, maybe I would not want that. I would feel cheated. So I was interested in what your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of discussion about, this is what I thought about the broadcasts of homogenized courses. That in fact, I think San Jose State's philosophy department complained and berated a Harvard philosophy professor for screwing the Brotherhood and offering a MOOC, right? You bastard, right? That's kind of, so the Spock model is, I think, a variation of this is really interesting. We could use MOOCs for continuing education to educate the world. And it's pretty cool. If you like teaching, having people who want to learn all around the world is pretty heady stuff. So that's, and we're helping people a lot, right? So we could keep the MOOC. The Spock model puts things back into the instructor's hands. So what do you want to use? What pieces of you want to use? And once we figure out the business model, you could be mixing and matching different segments from different instructors to see what they like. Kind of like what faculty do with PowerPoint slides. So often they'll go out there, they've got some slides, they'll look around, find PowerPoint slides and slide them in. So I think the San Jose State was a variation of the Spock model. They did it with a flip, closer to the flipped classroom. But we tried this experiment with 5 other groups, and we saw a wide variety of ones. And they liked it. I said, wow, this is really great. So I think if it's the Spock model where faculty are selecting, it's kind of like selecting a textbook. And textbooks also uniform, homogenized courses some, but there's a bunch of textbooks to pick from. So I think if the Spock model is that wins, I don't think that fear is, I don't think that's going to be, that won't be as, you as a student, a parent paying for a student to go to that school wouldn't feel like you're being cheated in that way. And then a bunch of people, like this is being used in community, we talked to some of the community college people, and they think what their value isn't the lecturing, it's the working with the individual students, what their weaknesses are, and helping them get up to speed to be able to take one of these courses. So that the value that they're adding is one-on-one education so that the students are getting value that way. We'll try this side. Go ahead.
I'm curious whether you found that cheating was a big problem.
Yeah. Cheating is a huge problem. Yeah, cheating is a huge problem.
Yeah, did you see a lot of evidence of that?
Yeah. Groups of students typing character for character, exactly the same characters, not even trying not to cheat, right? Yes, but if it's continuing education, I don't worry about that. Now, what we're doing this time, edX is doing with our version of it this time, is they're going to offer proctored exams. So they will take the same exams the Berkeley students in a room where somebody's watching them taking it. They have to pay extra for that, but then they'll get a certificate that has some seal of approval. Some of the other people are doing what I've heard called fig leaf cheating. So they're looking at the patterns of typing and saying, well, that person typed the exam. Well, was that person talking to somebody, getting the answers? Was that person looking on the internet? And they're trying to use cameras and stuff. So they're looking for a scalable anti-cheating way. I don't know if that's a solvable problem. But if that would be replacing undergraduate education. If you want to do continuing education for your own good to learn new material and cheat, go ahead. I don't really care.
Continuing education can also be used as a sort of credential to forward something.
Yeah, but I would say I would advise employers to beware, right? This is really cheap. You can get really great quality instruction. You can learn good tools, but you better double check. And by the way, nobody cares about the transcript. If there are undergraduates in here who think that employers will hire you on your GPA, I have bad news. you are going to get grilled. Our PhD students, if they go to Google, they'll get grilled by these tests. They are getting it. They do have a PhD, but you are going to be tested on that material. So I think if it's really for employment, they're not just going to believe you based on this thing. They're going to ask you hard questions. So you're cheating yourself. Over here.
Yeah, I had heard that San Jose State had planned to expand their program, and they ran some tests last year, and then it was abandoned, or they backed off on it.
No. I think they are doing something you're doing with something with Udacity right now, I think. So they did this one with edX, and I read articles in the newspaper that they were, the dean or the president of that campus was expanding the use. That's the last thing I read in the newspaper. people send me all the articles. Anything to do with MOOC, I see all of them. I haven't seen one where they abandoned. I've seen ones where they expanded. Go ahead.
Is there any validity to the argument that the mere presence of MOOCs allows like public school administrators to say, well, we don't need so many faculty, why don't we just have the MOOCs teach it? This will save us so much money.
I think Hennessy worries whether the U.S. educational model is sustainable, where we just keep raising tuition, you know. And so I've heard him say that if it's economically unsustainable, we may need to try something else here. So I think what we're doing is expanding the number of, you know, anybody who teaches computer science has more students they can deal with. And what I like is we're using the MOOC technology to let the number of Berkeley students who want to take the course take it, right? So, but those students are not taking some other courses. So Hennessy also uses the phrase underutilized faculty. And what are we going to do about that? My guess would be there'd be a shift of resources from the underutilized parts of the campus to the parts of the campus that are highly utilized. So this could have, well, before, if there's just so many classrooms, right, and so many faculty, what are you going to do, right? Well, this would be a way to increase the productivity of some faculty and decrease the productivity of other faculty, which could end up having implications for campuses.
But will the other faculty then just lose their jobs?
Tenure, you know, any of our universities, it had long-term impact, right? They retire or they leave. Are they replaced? You know, probably not. Firing is a pretty difficult thing to do in a tenure model. You have to shut down a whole department or something like that to get rid of faculty. So, I mean, we're not anywhere near that yet, right? We're not anywhere near that yet. And, you know, long-term. And besides, it's not like, okay, this might be bad for it's like we're journalists, right? We're journalists in this paper. Holy smokes, Craigslist is going to attack our classified ad. I've thought that over. That's going to affect my job. Don't do that, right? You can't not stop this from happening. The technology makes it available. It is going to happen. So I think the Spock version of that is the most you know, encouraging version of the use of the technology. But there might be a version of all these other issues we're addressed. There might be a version of this that would affect it. But boy, that's years from now. I'm going to save time for my story thing. But let's see, right here.
What do you feel are the major shortfalls right now of MOOCs? Like, where do we really need to still make some progress?
I think shortfalls of MOOCs, the things I talked about, you know, it's shortfalls. Are we just in the early days of the internet, right? Well, you know, early days of browsers, right? A lot of people, now that we're collecting data about learning that we've never been able to collect before, are excited about the potential of what we can get feedback. So we have talked more as a faculty about teaching in the last 18 months than in my prior 35 years. I like teaching. Let's talk about teaching. Nah, they don't want to talk about that. Now we talk about it all the time. I think the data coming back on what is effective and what is ineffective allows us to learn things that we just flat couldn't learn before, and we're trying all these educational experiments. So I'm excited about that, but not much of that has happened. And you know, what will machine learning and AI bring into this? You know, edX claims that they have technology that can grade essays. Boy, is that a controversial, you know, a statement. You have to train it with 100 essays, and they'll do as good a job as most readers on that. So these are kind of new frontiers of things that are going on that the MOOCs are inspiring people to work on. Cheating, I mean, if we're going to replace courses, cheating can't. You know, we have to stop cheating tennis track, and that sounds like a hard thing to do, but I'm not that excited about that particular problem. If it's Spock's, we know how to control cheating. If it's a continuing education, I think it's kind of irrelevant, or if you want to pay extra, we'll make you take exams in a classroom. Okay, my story. So Catherine McKinley started this. Why? Because apparently people think if you've been successful, then your life was just wonderful all the way. So I'm the first of my family to graduate from college. I had no plans of going to, since I was the first one to graduate from college, I was pretty good about that. I had no plans of graduate school. I was a wrestler and a math major in high school and college. I'm an accidental PhD. Jean Loubert, you were Jean Loubert, when he was a PhD student, new PhD, he taught a class in compilers. I was a math major. The math class was canceled, so I had no plan. I knew what computers were. I had no plans, but all right, I'll take a computer class. I loved it. And I casually mentioned to John Lubert that I was working in my dad's factory to play for college, and I'd rather do something other than work in the factory. I kind of mentioned it to him. He went out on his own, and he talked to a bunch of faculty and got me a job as an undergraduate. And so that made me decide to go to graduate school. So as long as I'm reflecting what works for me, I've tried to, it just seemed to make sense to me to maximize personal happiness rather than wealth. I think people maximize wealth thinking it leads to personal happiness, but those aren't the same thing. Family first. In this job, you can make families. If you don't make family first, you're not going to spend time with them. But I did every kid thing that was possible. I would say, interestingly, because I was a wrestler, somehow the physical courage got turned into intellectual courage. And I'm an optimist. So the story of Optimism, my high school sweetheart, we'd go on a few dates. She just had lots of steady people, so wasn't interested. But nevertheless, I screwed up my courage to ask her, would you go steady with me? And she says, I don't know how to say no. So for me, as an optimist, not a no is a yes, so I hugged her. And she felt pity on me. I'll break with him in a couple weeks. And we've been married 46 years. And I have passion. I'm a passionate guy. I have to believe in what I'm doing. So we swing for the fences in our research process. We're not butting for singles. We're trying to hit home runs. And then, I'm willing, probably because of the wrestling, I'm willing to take on enemies. I think Ed Lasowska and I decided to make an enemy out of Tony Tether, the head of DARPA. And there are people, well-known people in our field who were afraid to take him on because he's a vengeful son of a gun and had been vengeful in other organizations. But we took him on. Now, it turned out he was a really great enemy to have. And that everybody hated the guy, so we made a lot of friends. But let me warn you, as this phrase says, friends come and go, enemies accumulate. They're going to be enemy forever, right? He still gets excited when he hears about me. Have fun, work hard and play hard. I think if I didn't play soccer once a week in Sunday mornings, I couldn't have coped with everything, but as long as I do that, I can. And adults forget it's important to have fun. You have to do that. I've done everything as a team. All my books are co-authored. All my projects have multiple faculty. I hardly have any sole papers. And so I just kind of believe in my soul that a team of individuals, even without superstars, can beat the individual. So there's no losers on a winning team and no winners on a losing team. And one thing at a time. I actually woke up one day and said, it's not how many projects you start, it's how many you finish. It was like I got this voice from God, right? It said, well then I shouldn't be trying to do 75 things at once. I should do one big thing at a time, finish it, and do the next one. And ever since that voice was whispered in my head, that's what I've been able to do. And the final thing is getting honest feedback. I'm really good about getting feedback. If there's somebody who hates my guts, that hates my research, I'm sending him a version of my paper because he's going to give me honest feedback, right? We do research retreats, we get feedback, so I think seeking out feedback. Okay, with that, I will stop. Thanks for staying.